Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning, and welcome to the 8th annual Small Business Workshop. And my name is Mark S. Lee, and I'm the president and CEO of the Lee Group, which is an integrated strategic marketing consulting firm headquartered here in Metro Detroit. I'm also an adjunct professor, radio host, uh, a blogger for Cranes Detroit Business, and I'm also a media contributor to other media outlets here and across Metro Detroit. And we're so pleased that you're able to join us. So thank you very much for taking time out of your busy day to be engaged in this important series, now our 8th year, which is being presented by Fifth Third Bank, and we appreciate them. Again, thank you for joining us for the 8th annual Small Business Workshop. And I'm pleased you're able to join us for the third straight year virtually. As you start planning these things, you never know what the future looks like. But obviously, we'll continue to be virtual. And this is our third straight year doing the workshop virtually. And I'm so pleased to announce that we have a full house and we had to cap the registration. So we are thankful for that as well. So clearly there's a need out there. This event is free. And without our sponsors, this would not be possible. And I would like to welcome our presenting sponsor, Fifth Third Bank, to make a few comments. Again, they've been with us from the very beginning, and we appreciate all that they do in Detroit and for their support for this 8th annual Small Business Workshop. And I would like to invite Tawnya Rose, Vice President, Community Economic Development Manager, to say a few words on behalf of Fifth Third Bank, which will be followed by a brief video. Tawnya Rose, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Mark. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you today. As Mark said, this is the 8th year for the Small Business Workshop, and there is a reason that Fifth Third has been the presenting sponsor since the workshop began 8 years ago. It's because we believe that small businesses are the backbone of the economy and of our communities, and we want to make sure that small businesses have the tools and resources they need to be successful. This year's theme, The Future is Now, the Roadmap to Recovery, is very timely. While it appears that we are through the worst of the pandemic, with more people and businesses beginning to reemerge to a sense of normalcy, there are many challenges that remain for small businesses. Please know that Fifth Third Bank is here for you, as the other two partners are of this workshop. Field Institute and the Detroit Development Fund, who you also hear from during today's session. I'm proud that Fifth Third sponsors this workshop and that we're able to provide two dynamic speakers this year, Jalics and Navia McCloud. I'm confident you will get great insight, inspiration from both Tom and Navia and all the featured speakers today. I really appreciate you joining us, and we're getting ready to start that Fifth Third video. Back to you, Mark.
Hi, I'm Susan Armstrong. I'm president of Brindle Septic Tank Services, LLC, and we are in White Lake, Michigan. We actually provide two types of service. The first one is we clean septic tanks, and the second one is we provide a portable sanitation solution to the construction industry, entertainment industry. I actually bought the business from a gentleman that had owned it for 45 years. Being a woman in this industry is very difficult. It is very male-dominated. What motivates me is to actually improve the lives of my team and my customers. If I can help them professionally or personally to grow, get to the next level, then that really inspires me and motivates me to get up at that 4:30 in the morning and keep coming into the office day after day after day. The biggest risk I've ever taken as a business owner is buying this company. I was in a great job that I loved, and then all of a sudden, the rug gets pulled out from underneath you and you have to decide whether you're gonna go do the safe thing and go get a corporate job or chase your dreams. I cashed in my 401k, I sold my house, took the equity of the house, all my savings, and I just threw it in a big pile and said, let's go for it. That was a huge risk. And doing that at my age, okay, sometimes I think I'm crazy, but crazy or not, I'm having a lot of fun. I didn't have a relationship with Fifth Third Bank until actually I started looking to buy a company. I went down the path with a lot of the other larger SBA banks that have done a lot of SBA loans, and I was really disappointed. At Fifth Third Bank, they bent over backwards for me. They literally went the extra mile. They gave me an offer that beat every other bank in town. Fifth Third has been one of the critical team members to my team and my success. They are there to listen and to coach and advise me, and that has been so helpful.
We help our customers realize their goals by really investing ourselves in them. So this goes well beyond, just supplying capital. This is our time and attention to get to know them, their goals, their objectives, and the best way to help them reach their goals.
The biggest roadblock to small businesses is capital. A lot of times they're undercapitalized when they start. They underestimate what their needs are to launch a product or service or to just get operations going. Oftentimes people are intimidated from talking to a bank or banker, but they're here to help. We don't exist without the customers, and that's key.
In order to guide the entrepreneurs toward really good financial decisions, we help them by understanding the long-term consequences for their short-term decisions. We have the tools that can help model the range of things that might happen based on the decisions they make today, and that really puts them on the best path to success for the long term.
Support system is critical. You've got that saying, it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village to get a company, to the next level. Having that team around you who also will support you when you are having your hardest day, when you've lost faith in yourself and hope, and they go, you got this, and then you do.
I guess I realized I just told me to apologize. I want to thank you again, Tawnya. Thank you very much for your support and Fifth Third Bank support. You've been with us since day one, and we really appreciate you, appreciate all that the organization does here in Detroit, across the entrepreneurial community and beyond. Thank you very much. And a program like this would not be made possible without the support of all of our sponsors and partners. I mean, we've got a great level of them. And please let me take a moment to recognize the following sponsors. Of course, we know that the presenting sponsor is Fifth Third Bank. We also have the Detroit Development Fund, Comcast Business, Build Institute in partnership with Empower GoDaddy, First Independence Bank, the Live 6 Alliance. We also have wonderful partners, including Michigan Women Forward, State Farm Agent Cindy Fletcher out of Plymouth, Michigan, Tanner Friedman, Strategic Marketing Communications, and great media partners in the form of Detroit Public Television, or WTVS, and the Detroit Free Press. And I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge additional media coverage. We've got a lot of media coverage for this particular event. I want to thank D-Business, also WWJ News Radio 950, Crane's Detroit Business, and some other media outlets. So thank you all for your support. And without these sponsors and partners, today's event would not be possible. And by the way, it is free. This year's workshop series, The Future is Now, the Roadmap to Recovery, will further the conversations on what small businesses need to do to recover from this pandemic and provide resources to help reestablish a strong foundation and strengthen small businesses' core with the eye on the future. The objective is to identify practical solutions needed as businesses continue to recover from COVID-19, now in year 3. And topics will focus on what we have learned over the past year and look at future economic projections and the impact it's going to have on small businesses across the Detroit region and beyond. With economic and business challenges stemming from COVID-19, the series kicks off today with the topic, are you in it to win it? Are you in it to win it? With a 90-minute session featuring Fifth Third's Chief Market Strategist, a fireside chat, and a panel discussion focused on business recovery and sustainability. And also, Again, this is a series. This is the kickoff. The next three series on May 18th, the 25th, and June 1st, you will hear from business leaders, subject matter experts, and other entrepreneurs who will share their journey during these challenging times. Attendees will also have the opportunity to learn while gaining tools and practical solutions. And I am excited about this year's event because we have a great lineup of speakers, including panelists and workshop leaders. We want those not here today to learn from this experience. Therefore, we're going to rely on you to use social media to spread the word. Please use the following hashtags to share today's keys for success, and feel free to retweet them and I'll retweet you. You can go to hashtag small business workshop. That's hashtag small business workshop, or you can tag me on Twitter via @LeeGroup. That's @LeeGroup. Additionally, this event is being recorded and will be available on Detroit Public Television's YouTube channel and other platforms as well. And never was it more evident that small businesses are the backbone of our economy than during the COVID-19 pandemic. Collectively, small businesses are the most influential sector of our society, fueling more than 65% of job creation. Yet unfortunately, they were the hardest hit during the onset and spread of the recent global pandemic. And the fact is, many small businesses still struggle. And quite frankly, and we see it here in Detroit, many have failed and many more will fail, as much as we hate to say that. However, economists are projecting a more modest approach, a more modest recovery potentially. Just heard some more economic news this morning. I'm sure that Tom will get you briefly. And we're going to hear what the future might look like for the balance of this year, not just in Detroit, but across the country as well. And now there are tools in place compared to last year, from vaccinations to business-related protocols to the economy slowly reopening. The question still remains, what impact will this recovery have on Detroit and our entire state and beyond? With this as the backdrop, the challenge is to focus on business recovery and sustainability given these headwinds. And that's why this workshop is important, and I applaud you for being here today. All right, with that as a backdrop, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Mr. Tom Jalics. And Tom is the Chief Market Strategist at Fifth Third Bank, where he is responsible for leading the investment management group's asset allocation process, both strategic and tactical, which informs the management of the $40 billion in assets under management at the bank. And he provides internal and external communication on the economy and the markets, making public speaking and media appearances on behalf of the bank. He is a discretionary investment portfolio manager focusing on high net worth clients. And prior to his current role, he was director of asset allocation at the firm. He has over 20 years of industry experience, and he's a much sought after speaker. And in fact, if you listen to WWJ all day yesterday, he was highlighted as part of this broadcast to help talk about the future of this economy and this workshop. Without further ado, I am pleased to welcome Mr. Tom Jalics. Tom, take it away.
Mark, thanks so much for the invite. It's a delight to be with you. I hope at one point in the future we all get to get in the same room. I think we're getting a lot closer to that. We're not necessarily there just yet, but I love the notion that we have these Zoom meetings. The last 2 years have been pretty rough from a getting business done perspective without it. But between you and me, I'm sick of them. I'm ready to get back into a room and say hello to people, shake hands, have lunch, have a cup of coffee, and go from there. So you'd like me to share my screen, right? I'm going to try to do that. I'll keep talking here. So my name is Tom Jalics. I'm the Chief Market Strategist for Fifth Third Bank. That's a fancy title. All it really means is I lead a group of investment professionals, and our job is ultimately to make investment recommendations on behalf of our wealth management clients. Kind of one of our core tenets to make these investment recommendations is if we can identify the phase of the business cycle that we are in, we will make better investment recommendation decisions. It sounds easier said than done. There's typically 4 phases to a business cycle. It is recession, early, mid, and late cycle expansion. And all of those 4 business cycles have different have different characteristics. We've got 90 some odd years of financial market and economic history that's relatively modern. And our big belief is that past is prologue. Like we've likely seen we've had some clues from the past to kind of identify where we're going to go in the future. And so if we get that phase of the business cycle right, we will make better investment decisions. And today where we are, the title of this conversation, the title of my slides are The Reckoning. And it's a little scary, but that's kind of where we are in this business cycle. It has been an unusual business cycle, starting from kind of the depths of the pandemic downturn in the summer of 2022 to where we are today. We've recovered almost fully from an economic perspective, from a job perspective, where we were prior to the pandemic 2 years ago. So that's the really, really good news. I think maybe the not so good news is there are some issues that we're contending with today that will really make or break where our economy goes over the next 12 to 24 months. And when we talk about the reckoning, really the big reckoning is all about inflation. Listen, I don't need to tell you guys, I'm not going to tell you anything that you really don't know already today, but inflation will really dictate where this economy goes, not only for the United States, but for Metro Detroit and for Michigan at the state writ large. If over the next 2 to 3 quarters, we wake up in December of 2022 and inflation moderates, then we would say that we've got many quarters and many years ahead of economic growth. But over the next 6 months, if inflation stays really sticky and really high, kind of where we are today, then I think the risks really start rising for some downturns in our economy in the back half of 2023. So that's kind of the big picture that we're talking about with our clients, with our prospects, with our business owners. We think we are late in this economic cycle, but that doesn't mean the cycle is over. This, late cycle periods could last upwards of 4, 5, 6 years. They also could last 6 to 12 months. And our view, if you're just going to take one thing away from our conversation today, is that inflation is very, very high today. If over the next 6 months, the Federal Reserve, who is raising interest rates to curb inflation, if we get evidence that inflation starts to moderate, then I think this late cycle expansion can last for many quarters and many years. And if we wake up, probably in December of this year, and inflation is still sitting around 7, 8%, then I think the risks of a recession or a downturn at the back half of 2023 really start rising. Again, our view is the economy is strong today. We're going to talk about the labor market. We're going to talk about the jobs picture. That's really, really important for our economy, for the Michigan economy, for the Detroit metro economy. That is in a really good spot. But inflation is the big bugaboo that we're going to be dealing with over the next 6 months. This page I'm kind of showing you, hopefully you can see the slides, are just kind of an executive summary of what I was just talking about. And again, I think the short term, the next 2 to 3 to 4 to 5, 6 months, I think are going to be relatively strong. Then after that, we have to contend with inflation. So let's talk about some good news first. The good news is kind of this slide here on page 2. This is a look at the U.S. unemployment rate. That's the green line going back 40 some odd years. When the green line goes lower, unemployment rate goes down, and that really means the jobs picture is improving. Where we sit today, all the way to the right at 3.6%, that's the unemployment rate currently. It's basically the lowest unemployment rate that we've seen in our country since December of 1969. We reached it for about a month right prior to the pandemic. You can kind of see in 2020, in February 2020, the unemployment rate was 3.5%. We've recovered basically all the jobs that we lost during that nasty recession that we had as COVID shutdowns took place in the spring and summer of 2020. That's the good news. The U.S. is a consumption-based economy. About 68%, let's round it up, 70% of the U.S. economy is driven by people like us that have jobs, earn wages, and ultimately spend those wages. That's what drives our consumer-based economy forward. And so when you have very, very low unemployment, like I'm showing you on this slide, that's really, really good news for the economy. Again, people that want jobs have jobs, they're earning wages, they're spending those wages on goods and services, and that moves our economy forward. That's the good news. But I don't want to be a nervous Nelly here too, but you can kind of see when this green line gets to very low levels, at least over the last 40 years, it typically flattens out over several quarters, and then it kind of starts ticking up. And then you run into one of these gray bars. And those gray bars on the slide are your recessions over the last 40 some odd years. There's 6 different recessions. The most recent one, of course, we had during COVID in the summer of 2020. Typically, again, during recessions, businesses are very cautious. They are not spending and borrowing and investing. They're trimming payroll. Jobs picture gets worse. The consumption-based economy starts suffering, and we go through this downturn economically. So typically, kind of what we've been telling our clients is all the way to the right today, the jobs picture is very strong. We have the lowest unemployment essentially that we've had in 50 years. People that want jobs have jobs. And this is going to be a very good news for the 2022 economy. We do not see a recession or a downturn in 2022, primarily because the jobs picture is so strong. But typically when we get this low in the unemployment rate and the jobs picture is this tight and the labor market is this tight, and we'll talk about that too. I'm sure the labor market and hiring is on everyone's minds as well. Typically when you get this low in the unemployment rate, it's one of these signals to suggest that you're late in the cycle. Now, the cycle doesn't mean that it's ending today, and that is not our viewpoint at all. But all it means is it should put you on notice that we're closer to the end of the cycle than probably the beginning. We've got potentially many quarters and many years ahead, but it really depends on the jobs picture going forward. And the kind of the trigger factor that we have in this cycle, which is a little bit different than the cycles that we've had in our country since the early 80s, is inflation is persistently high. And we're going to talk about that in the next couple slides. This is another good news slide. This is a look at consumer or household debt service and principal payments as a percentage of income. It's kind of a proxy for, are consumers over leveraged? Do they have too much debt relative to the amount of money that they're making? When that green line goes lower, that means that there's really not a massive amount of leverage on consumers' balance sheets. And that's where we are today. All the way to the right, we're looking at somewhere in the range of 9% of household debt service and principal payments as total consumer income. That's the lowest number that we've seen, as far as this chart goes back to 1980. So when you put a picture where consumers are not overly leveraged, they don't have a ton of debt, and the jobs picture is as strong as it was, as I showed you on the previous slide, it's really good news for our economy. Again, I'm going to say it like 20 times, and 70% of the US economy is based on consumer spending. So when the consumer is in good shape, it really portends to decent economic outcomes, at least in the very near term. And that's where we are today. One of the other things that we've been watching to pay attention to see kind of where we are in the business cycle and whether we should be optimistic or pessimistic is really this slide here. And this green line kind of fluctuates over the last 20 or so years is a look at cash in money market mutual funds. Now, this is for businesses and individuals. You can see that green line is all the way up and to the right. It's at $4.5 trillion in money market funds. This is kind of cash sitting on the sidelines. We kind of look at it as dry powder, either waiting to be consumed, spent on goods and services, or for businesses to kind of invest in themselves to help them grow. And what you can kind of see is that the average, at least in the last 10 years, from 2010 to 2020 of this green line, it was, let's call it $2.5 trillion. To us, it looks like the American consumer has about $2 trillion more of cash kind of sitting on the sidelines. I don't know how your household works, but I can tell you how my household works. When cash comes in the door, it gets spent. We're terrible as a US society of saving. That's been our history for 40 or 50 years, but we're very, very good at spending. So this notion that we've got kind of $2 trillion more than we had in the previous 10 or 12 years sitting on the sidelines is unusual. And kind of the four most dangerous words in investing is it's different this time. It's almost never different this time. Again, we're big believers in that past is prologue and that there's lots of history to suggest that these cycles repeat themselves. So kind of our view is with all this cash sitting on the sidelines, we believe that businesses will start putting this to productive use, trying to grow their businesses. And we believe consumers will start spending down this excess cash, moving our consumption-based economy forward. So the three good news slides are we have a very low unemployment rate, jobs picture is really strong. The US consumer is not leveraged. There's not a lot of debt on consumers' balance sheets. And there's all this dry powder sitting out there waiting for consumers to put to productive uses. That's the good news picture. Here's the not so good news picture. And again, I'm not telling you anything that you don't already know, but inflation is the primary risk that we're facing today in the US economy. You're facing it in Detroit, you're facing it in Michigan, the overall economy in the US is facing it as well. This is a look at something that the Federal Reserve calls the US Personal Consumption Expenditure Core Price Index. Woo, that's a mouthful. That's a lot of alphabet soup, but really all it means is this is a measure of inflation that the Federal Reserve is watching. And that green line up and to the right is at 5 and change percent. The target, what the Federal Reserve wants, is that blue line at 2%. So again, I'm not great at math, but when that green line is 2.5, maybe 3 times almost as much as what the Federal Reserve wants inflation to look like, it tells us that inflation is a problem. This is the primary risk to the length and strength of the economy from where we go from here. The Federal Reserve has 2 jobs. their first job is to make sure that everybody that wants a job can get a job in our country. And they call that getting the economy to full employment. And that earlier slide where we talked about the unemployment rate at 3.6%, the Federal Reserve, I think, is doing a really good job at their primary first number one job. Their second job, the Fed's second job, is to keep prices under control. And they define, again, prices under control as about inflation at 2%. So again, that green line is way above the 2% target. And what this tells us is inflation has been sticky, it's been more persistent, and the Federal Reserve is now going to try to bring down this inflation over the next several weeks, quarters, and months. The Federal Reserve has a hammer in their hand, and the nail that they're trying to hit is inflation. And then the hammer that they have in their hand to cure high inflation is higher interest rates. This is kind of what we think is happening right now in the market. If you're watching, a lot of financial news last week, you saw that the Federal Reserve raised short-term interest rates by 0.5 percentage point, by 50 basis points. Short-term interest rates were basically zero for the last 2 years. And now short-term interest rates are in the 75 basis points or 0.75% range. The Federal Reserve is going to raise interest rates as high as they can to move that inflation number closer to 2% over the next 6 or so months. If they are able to bring that number down, that inflation number down, then I think we're going to have many quarters and many years ahead of economic growth. And if they can't, they're going to continue to raise interest rates. And ultimately, there's lots of past being prologue here, is that when the Federal Reserve raises interest rates too fast, too quickly, too high, we run into some economic problems. We have big slowdowns, and sometimes we have recessions. This chart is what investors believe the short-term interest rate, the Fed funds rate, will look like at the end of December, in December of 2022. So on top right, investors believe that there'll be essentially 10.25% interest rate hikes. That would put short-term interest rates in the 2.75% range. Again, today they're at about 0.75. So the market now believes that the Federal Reserve is an inflation fighter, and they're going to use their primary tool, their hammer, which is higher interest rates, to curb inflation. Unfortunately, we as investors and business owners won't know if it works for many months. Again, we've been kind of telling our clients and prospects that we wake up in December and this number is not 5.5, but it's 3, 2.5, the inflation numbers start to come down dramatically, then we're in a good spot, and that the economy will have many quarters and many years ahead of economic growth. But if we wake up in December and this number hasn't moved, interest rates are going to go even higher than what market participants expect. Again, market participants expect short-term interest rates to be around 2.75% in December. If inflation is still 5 or higher, that number is almost certainly going to go much, much higher. So that's where we are today. It's a known unknown. And we're watching these inflation numbers very, very closely. And the hope is that higher interest rates will curb inflation and lead us to a much longer expansion. I'm going to talk one more thing, and then we'll get to some stuff that's going on in the Michigan economy. We think the biggest thing that's kind of holding back inflation, which is a longer term kind of secular issue, is labor. We don't have enough workers in our society today to capture all the jobs that are open out there. And this is a picture of that. When you see the green bars, there's kind of a zero horizontal there. When you see the green bars, it means we have more workers available than we have job openings. And where we are today, all the way to the right, we have more job openings than we have people filling those jobs. So right now, as we sit today, there's about 11 million job openings in our country, which is great news. It tells us that businesses have demand for their goods and services, and they want to expand by hiring people. That's really good news. The bad news is that there's only 5 million people looking for those 11 million jobs. I think we're about somewhere between 5 and 6 million job seekers short. And that's a problem in that it's leading to higher wages across the board. These are a look here on this page, page 21. The green line is average hourly earnings. And then the blue line is the employment cost index. The employment cost index includes benefits. And you can kind of see all the way to the right on both of these slides, these are both ticking higher. And what this happens is when wages are ticking higher, when wages and benefits are ticking higher, it typically means that profit margins on companies are starting to come down. And to counteract smaller margins, businesses are passing on prices to consumers. When they pass on prices to consumers, there's inflation, and inflation that's becoming sticky. And that's kind of where we are today. So this is a longer term issue that we're trying to solve. And it's not just a national problem. It's every single state has more job openings than they have job seekers. You can kind of see Michigan is on the left-hand side, about a third of the way through there. And all this is telling you, when that number, that green bar is above 1, it's telling you that there are more job openings than there are job seekers. Again, it's good news in that businesses have lots of job openings, but it tells you it's bad news, and it means wages are likely going higher because businesses are going to be competing for these workers that are out there. My guess is that everyone on this call today is dealing with this in their primary job, in their primary business, where it's very, very, very difficult to find an additional worker. This is different than the last 10 or so years prior to the pandemic, where we had more workers than we had job openings. And that kept those inflationary pressures of wages under control. We're in a different spot today than we were 10 or 12 years ago. Our belief is that these things are not going away. On the left-hand chart here is kind of the structural issue that we have with labor in our country. The green line on the left-hand side is the US fertility rate. This is the number of babies that adult rearing females in our country are having. It's 1.64. And that blue shaded line is the replacement rate of workers. We're losing 2.1 people from the labor force every single year. So to us, there's a structural shortage of workers in our country, and this is not going away anytime soon. It's going to be leading to a little bit higher wage growth and stickier inflation that we had prior to 2020. And this is a long-term issue that we have. So let me wrap up the national picture with kind of a good news slide. And this is where we are from kind of a overall economic perspective. This is my favorite chart in the whole packet here today. This is a look at the U.S. economy going back to just at the end of World War II. Those gray bars are your recessionary periods, and then the green shaded areas are the cumulative U.S. economic expansions during the good times, and the blue shaded areas that are below that zero horizontal are the cumulative economic contractions that we have during recessions. And if a picture could tell you 1,000 words, it tells you that the good times in our country, even though we have a cyclical economy, cyclical ups and cyclical downs, the good times far outweigh the bad times that we have in our economy. And we're big believers that the past is prologue, that it's not different this time. And that at least in our country, since 1982, these expansions that we've had economically have lasted 5 to 7 years on average. So that question that we're asking ourselves today is it different? Is it 1982 or is it 1994? In 1994, you can kind of see 1994, we had a similar situation where we had very low unemployment, but we had high inflation, and the Federal Reserve increased interest rates by about 3%. And there was a fear in 1994 that by raising interest rates 3% to curb inflation, we would be heading towards a recession. Well, you can kind of see that we didn't see the next recession from 1994 until 2001. So the Federal Reserve was able to raise interest rates by quite a lot without killing the economy. So is it 1994 today, or is it 1982? In 1982 was one of these situations in our country where we came off of the 1970s where we had very high inflation. And we had a new Fed chair come in the late 70s, early 80s, whose job was to curb that inflationary environment. He did that by raising interest rates quite a lot. If you remember 1982, the 30-year mortgage rate, I think, was in the 18% range. And that primary reason is interest rates had to go high to kill that decade of very high inflation. In 1979 and 1980, Fed funds rate, short-term interest rates were raised by a lot, and it caused a short recession. And then inflation went down quite a lot. In 1981, back half of 1981, inflation started ticking up again. And that's where our Fed chair at that time raised interest rates all the way up to mid-teens, double digits, and it caused a double dip recession. Again, we're asking ourselves today, inflation is very high. Is it 1984? Is it 1994? Is it 1982? Our belief is that the Fed is trying to kind of thread a needle here by raising interest rates to curb inflation. And we won't know whether it works probably until December of this year. So be optimistic, continue to borrow and invest in your business. You can see from this picture that it's been a terrible bet to bet against American entrepreneurship, capitalism, technological advances, or a positive business cycle. invest in your business over the very long term, and invest in your 401k, your IRA, your 403b over the very long term. If you do that, history shows that you have very, very good odds of success. So I'm probably over my time, Mark. Why don't I stop talking and just thank you one more time for the invite. It was a delight to be here with you. I'm happy to answer any questions offline if anyone would like, and I'll pass the ball back over to you. Thank you.
Tom, before you go, I know you have to run. I do have a question for you, but I got to say, man, this is very powerful. We get bits and pieces of information, not exactly sure what direction the economy is going in. And this is very powerful and very much relatable to entrepreneurs, as you can see why costs are going up and what they certainly should be doing about it. We're going to get to that a little bit later. But a question that we have for you before we let you go, let's see, is it correct that the unemployment rate is low? There are over 1 million less jobs to go around due to long-term downsizing as a result of the pandemic. If
So
this is accurate,
it's a very good question. So where we sit today is we're about 500,000 jobs short of where we were in February of 2020. So the US economy, non-farm jobs in February of 2020 had about 152 million total jobs. And today we've got about 151.5 million jobs out there. So we are almost all the way back. I know that, what we were talking about is, has the economy fully recovered? And there's lots of reasons to suggest that it has. The jobs picture is almost there. I think we're about 500,000 jobs short. But if we would have had this talk in the summer of 2020, we had about 130 million jobs out there relative to 152. We lost 22 million jobs over the course of 3 or 4 months. From 2020 to today, we've gained 21.5 million jobs. That's really, really good news. But we're not all the way back. But again, that's part of all the issues that we've been going through in the last couple of years. But again, I think we personally are more optimistic than negative about the prospects for our economy going forward. But there have been changes, no doubt.
I want to thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it. We appreciate you sharing this information with us. Have a great day. Thank you. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for the invite.
Absolutely. And what we're going to do is just continue to drop questions in the Q&A. Powerful. Someone asked for to get copies of these presentations. No, this session is being recorded. We would encourage you to go back and certainly look at the information in the slides as well. We're going to segue into a fireside chat now. That's going to continue the conversation started with Tom, and then we're going to have a panel discussion that continues the conversation even further. And then next week, we're going to be talking about hiring, going to be talking about talent during a challenged marketplace. So now I'm pleased to welcome Ms. Navia McCloud, National Sales Manager, Business Banking, Fifth Third Bank, for a fireside chat with me, a one-on-one conversation. We're going to focus on both the macro and micro Eastern Michigan, Metro Detroit perspective of what is occurring with small businesses and how Fifth Third is addressing their needs. And in her current role, Navia oversees the strategic planning, operations, sales force, and product development for the bank's business banking division. Her line of business serves clients with annual revenues of up to $20 million across more than 1,000, over close to 1,100 banking centers across 10 states. She joined Fifth Third in 2019 as a director of business banking, effectiveness, and client experience. She has over 24 years of impressive industry experience and has held critical roles, all with a central focus on building engaged teams that deliver solutions based on the wants and needs. Navia, good morning, and thanks for joining me for this fireside chat. How are you?
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. Thanks for joining us. Let's just jump right into the conversation, and we'll get to Tom's comments a little bit later. Let me just start out with the very basics. The theme this year is the road to recovery. The road to recovery. What does that mean for you, and in particular for small businesses? Road to recovery.
Yeah, so when I think about the road to recovery, particularly in Michigan, we've got to think about 3 key areas. I would say the first is confidence. When we think about confidence, people think that, confidence in a vaccine, confidence in treatments. But I think we have to continue to build confidence around the idea that we can be reasonably assured that we're not going to have any further long-term disruption to the economy, right? So confidence that we can take a step forward. I think the other another piece would be workforce stabilization. And Tom spoke about this as well. I think many of the challenges relative to labor that small businesses face, all businesses face. And that is that we have to have skilled people doing the jobs to help deliver our products and services. And I think we found ourselves in a situation, which is a bit of an anomaly, that we just don't have enough people, right? So that's the second. I'd say the third is we need to continue to move the needle and stabilize the supply chain. So many of our businesses rely on finished and unfinished goods from overseas. And the constant unplanned disruptions, increased transportation costs, all impact businesses across the board, including small businesses and the Michigan economy.
Standing. And so let's think about this, Navia. Here we are in year 3, although we're hopefully going to downside of this pandemic. It appears that we are, although numbers are beginning to creep back up ever so slowly again. But let's think back to 3 years ago and think about what the challenges were. Now let's fast forward to today. Here we are mid-May of 2022. So what's been some of the most significant challenges or changes that you've noticed over the last 2 or 3 years for small businesses? And how has it changed over that 3-year period for, again, for entrepreneurs? And what's changed? What's changed over the last few years?
Yeah, and so a couple things. The first, I'm going to come back to labor, right?
Okay.
So you think about labor 3 years ago and you think about labor today. We heard Tom say that, I think he said 11 million jobs are available in this country. Yet we have only 6 million people actually looking for a job. So that's a 5 million person gap. And so when you think about the small business economy, this directly impacts, I believe, small businesses probably in a more disproportionate way, right? Because they're competing for employees, salary, benefits, all of the things. And so they're having to be more creative and thoughtful around how they attract and retain talent in order to, A, keep their doors open, but continue to produce and manufacture and do all the things they were doing 3 years ago. So I think that would probably be the single largest change between, I would say 18 and 22, 18, 19, and 22.
Yeah. And again, for those of you who have questions, please drop them in the Q&A in the chat room. They're being monitored by Tamika from RSVP, our event planner. By the way, they do a great job. So please drop them in the chat room if you have any questions. As we shift into this recovery mode, right, mid-May 2022, which industries from your perspective continue to struggle, and which ones have basically retrenched and now are achieving a level of stability and even growth as we look forward?
So I'll start with what worked. I mean, besides Amazon during the shutdown, I think all of the businesses that had a major online platform and ability to deliver goods and services remotely fared really well during the pandemic when everyone was home. Where we had and where there was ability to innovate and create different channels to deliver. Where we struggled were areas that required in-person patronage. So you think about gyms, right? Like you couldn't go to the gym to work out because they were closed. You think about travel, airlines, you think about hotel, you think about, and all the ancillary services that support those businesses, travel agencies, all of those small businesses were negatively impacted. Now we're seeing a large swing in the right direction. To Tom's point, the jobs have come back, the activity has come back, all good things. But I think the continued resources and thoughtfulness around how small businesses can continue to deliver when certain areas of their businesses are disrupted. So becoming a lot more well-rounded, particularly in the digital space.
And as we think about that digital space, I would think that some of the industries that some would thrive are those the Grubhubs and the Instacarts of the world and those delivery services. Yeah, really took off. So if I was thinking about, and I'll come back to the next question, this is kind of an ancillary question. If I was thinking about starting a business even now during these challenging times, would that be a good field to get into, or do I need to leverage technology in my existing business? Talk about the integration of technology in your current mindset.
Yeah, so I think that we're at a point in the cycle where we want to be mindful of how we're spending our dollars, right? So we need to be mindful, but where it's possible, I think it's very important to make sure that we're investing in digital solutions that are going to support us for the future. And I think that was a gap that a lot of people, a lot of small businesses, they struggled because they didn't have an online platform. I will say that those who did or were able to get creative fairly quickly were able to continue to deliver their products and services through the cycle, through the entire pandemic.
And I saw in morning's New York Times or maybe it's a free press or a paper this morning where now it appears that some tech industries are beginning to lay off some individuals as well. But it's interesting to hear, to those of you viewing this, you heard what she said about leveraging technology. That became a huge opportunity over the last 2 or 3 years. If you're not capitalizing, on technology, you really should be something you need to integrate as part of your business strategy moving forward. Moving on, Navia, based on Tom's presentation regarding economics, the balance of his balance of your projections, the good news and a couple of bad news points in his overall presentation. How should businesses be prepared? Okay, here we are again, mid-May. Let's look ahead to the balance of this year and beyond. What should businesses be doing now to be prepared based on what he presented this morning? What should they really be focused on as they think about recovering and business sustainability and growth?
It's funny, I get asked that question a lot in different, cycles. What I will say today, though, is that, and this is a constant. If you don't already have a strong relationship with your banker, now's the time.
Mhm.
Use your banker as an additional tool in your toolbox to help develop a plan based on your individual needs, objectives, where you want to be, right? So I can't stress that enough. Have a relationship with your banker, an honest and open one, and you will reap many rewards from that relationship. I
Yeah.
would also say,
Go
yeah,
ahead. Go right ahead, please.
I would also say don't overextend, neither personally or your business. But like we said before, when it's feasible, I think we do have to continue to invest in automation and digital solutions that are going to support your business into the future. And then lastly, I'm going to point this out because we saw this a lot, but double down on all the creative solutions that we came up with during the pandemic, right? Continue to be creative and think through those processes and double down those new revenue streams that were created. So
Yeah.
those are the 4 areas.
Yeah. Is now a good time to extend yourself additional credit?
I would say that that's not a one size fits all question. It depends on your industry. It depends on a lot of balance sheet factors. So again, I think that's why I always say make sure you have a strong relationship with your bank and banker so that they can help create a customized solution for you.
Yeah. And I would also suggest before you move on, board of advisors. For those of you tuning in, if you have a board of advisors or an informal group, if you will, that you can refer to, I get asked that question a lot. Do you have a formal board of advisors, an informal board of advisors? Look, I know you're not an expert in everything. I'm not an expert in everything. People think we are, but we're really not. But one of the phrases that my father used to tell me was always surround yourself with good people. And he always used to tell me, surround yourself with people who are smarter than you. And don't be afraid to ask questions. So I think that informal board of advisors that we're referencing here, also having a banker, someone who can understand the financials, help navigate these challenges, would be a huge plus for your business. Anything you want to add to that comment?
Yeah, I would say that it's okay to not know. It's okay to say, I don't know,
I don't
and
know.
to seek advice from people who do know. A lot of our small business owners are really good at developing their widget or selling their product, but they need some support on the business side of it, and that's okay. That's what their banker, their CPA, their network is there to support them with.
Okay. So last question I have for you. Let's look ahead now. Let's look ahead now here in Detroit. And from Tom's presentation, from your assessment, how are you feeling? How should entrepreneurs feel from across Metro Detroit and beyond looking ahead? Should they feel pessimistic, optimistic, challenged? What should their internal assessment be, and how do you feel externally?
All right, so I will say that based on what we witnessed during the pandemic, the creativity, the agility, the nimbleness of small business owners is unmatched. You know, small business owners figured out how to get things done during the pandemic. And so I'm extremely bullish on that segment in general, because that fighting spirit exists like no other in the small business space. Um, I will also say that when you think about Detroit and the larger economy, we talked a little bit about supply chain, but when larger companies now they're starting to want to pull back on their reliance on overseas imports. You think about that, and you think about Detroit and how we're uniquely qualified with our infrastructure, with our workforce, to absorb some of that opportunity. I think the outlook for Metro Detroit is fantastic. And that coupled with our vibrant small business community, I'm very bullish on the local economy.
Conversation earlier this week, someone called me and we were talking about her particular business. And she's a Detroit-based business, and she made a conscious decision to locate her business downtown. And she made a conscious decision to hire Michiganders. I still say Michiganians. Okay, Michiganders, I guess. And so but she had challenges as she was trying to get the business set up. It's now set up, but I want to get to the point about supply chain management. I asked her what her supply chain management strategy was. She says, Mark, I'm having things, quite frankly, produced here in Detroit, in Michigan. And she says, by me doing that, I'm saving. She says, I'm getting my product within 4 to 6 weeks on her shelf, as opposed to relying or going overseas, which is what people were encouraging to do, was to outsource her business production so she could save money. But then she said, Mark, those products will still be sitting on the port somewhere in Los Angeles, California. And basically, when I'm going to this conversation, so to your point, she thought creatively, and she's got her production facilities here in Michigan, and she's able to have product on her shelf and online in lightning speed these days.
And probably the transportation costs are offsetting, so we're going to see, I believe, a lot of businesses start to develop that mindset, which is a great thing for our economy.
Outstanding. Navia, I want to thank you. Is there anything you want to add before we let you go? Anything else you want to add or share with our attendees today?
I would say, first of all, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Sure.
But let's stay optimistic. Let's continue to support our small and local businesses whenever we can as consumers. I think that it's huge, and I think sometimes we forget that. So today, my ask to everyone on this call is to support a small business.
Outstanding. Navia McCloud, thank you very much. We appreciate your time, great insights, and have a great day.
Thank you, you too.
All righty. What we're going to do is to segue into a panel discussion as well. Before we do, I do want to emphasize, if you have any questions, drop them in the chat room. Detroit has 62,000 small businesses. I've talked about this publicly, and I've talked about it publicly. I've written about it as well, but we are the 4th largest city in the country when it comes to entrepreneurship, 4th largest. That's according to the 2012 U.S. Census data. And 80% of those are women-owned and minority-owned businesses. But by the same token, if you think about what's happened over the last few years, as you all know, I'm an educator, I'm an adjunct professor. I was sharing this with my students right before the end of the semester, was as I was driving up a street, actually I was going to a studio, because I was going to a studio for the first time in 3 years, or 2 years. And I noticed the number of storefronts that were empty, even compared to 2 years ago. So that's a challenge. And that's why we do this workshops, provide you with resources and ideas, prepare your thought process as we think about looking ahead. We want those storefronts to be full. We want all these businesses to thrive. It creates 60 to 70% of all the net new jobs in this country. It's not a knock on our big brothers, on big businesses. It's the reality. People think that the big businesses are the economic generators that drive the business, drive jobs. It's actually the opposite. Small businesses generate 70% of the net new jobs, according to the US SBA, over a 10-year period. I want you to think about that number and let it sink in. So for every business that doesn't make it, there are more jobs on the line. That's why we do this. This is why this is important. We have assembled a great panel for this morning's discussion. And the question we're going to be addressing this morning is, what should small businesses do as we're moving forward. What should we be doing? So let me take the opportunity of introducing our panelists. Tawnya Rose, and you've heard from her earlier, and we heard from her earlier, is the Vice President of Community Economic Development Manager for Fifth Third Bank, and she is committed to cultivating community development strategies, managing community partnerships, and providing impactful financial services and products leading to financially healthy people and sustainable communities. Tawnya is also responsible for managing and leading the region's compliance with Community Reinvestment Act, as well as philanthropy. And she's responsible for providing thoughtful programs and partnerships that support economic development and small business lending. She's also involved with programs for affordable housing and home ownership initiatives, as well as supporting efforts to improve the quality of life for underserved communities. And I will tell you about Tawnya. I follow her on social media. She's been out in the community as well as other members of the bank. They've been involved in reaching out to the community and going to different neighborhoods across Detroit, and they're doing some great things. Tawnya Rose is joining us. Ray Waters, and I affectionately call Ray the mayor of entrepreneurship. Everybody knows Ray, and a wonderful man. He's the president of Detroit Development Fund, and they provide growth capital to businesses in Detroit, and they provide financing packages for Detroit developers working on affordable housing projects and commercial projects in Detroit neighborhoods. Also provide lines of credit for smaller contractors in the city, allowing them to undertake new construction jobs. Ray Waters will be joining us. And thirdly, I believe we have her. I think we do. Okay, she is here. Regina Ann Campbell is the president of Build Institute, and it's a nonprofit idea incubator for the Detroit region. And before joining Build, she was the chief program officer for Epicenter Memphis in Tennessee, where she was responsible for national strategic partnerships and a portfolio of programs, initiatives, and systems which ensured inclusive access and vibrancy for the entrepreneurial community in the greater Memphis region. And as an economic thought leader, she is successful, has a successful track record of creating economic growth and doing other things here in Detroit. And I also like to say, although she lived in Memphis, she is from Detroit, born and raised in Detroit. I just gotta make sure that's crystal clear. So I'd like to welcome Tawnya, Ray Waters, and Regina Ann Campbell. Again, if you have questions, I'm gonna take a few moments to go through questions. If you have questions, please drop them in the chat room. Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
All right, glad to have you all. Thank you again for joining us on this very important topic, the road to recovery. And here we are, the future starts now, the road to recovery. So let me start with you, all of you. Let's start, the question is very simple. Today's theme is, are you in it to win it? The overall theme for the series is the road to recovery, but today's theme is, are you in it to win it? So I want to ask each one of you, and Regina, I will start with you. What does that mean to you? What does that mean for businesses? I'm going to give you 2 minutes to answer that question. What does it mean to you? What does it mean for small businesses? If you want to certainly talk about your organization as part of this response, go right ahead. Regina Ann Campbell, we'll start with you.
Certainly, Marcus Lee. Good morning, everybody. Happy to be here today and among Ray Waters and Tawnya Rose. Such a great thing. So what it means, in it to win it, to me means us as a community-based businesses now being poised and ready to reopen, to continue business. I see community-based businesses as the lifeline for quality of life in neighborhoods, and they are essential for us. And so they actually help build our economic tax base, and so they're important. Build, we help them by being able in it to win it with our entrepreneurial education. We also have access to capital from grants to loan funds in partnership with Michigan Women's Forward, as well as entrepreneur and experts. There are entrepreneurs who say that they need it one-on-one and access to capital, with many of the presenters have been talking about so far. And so we are in it to help them win, whether opening their business or continuing to grow their business.
Tawnya Rose, let me come down to you. Same question. What does in it to win it mean to you? And what does that mean for entrepreneurs across Metro Detroit as well?
Well, what in it to win it to me means is doing whatever it takes to make sure that you're successful. I often use sports analogies because we're all big sports fans here. Everybody knows that the NFL draft pick is coming up in a couple years. So just like the NFL, you start out with your draft picks. That's what you need to do when you're in a small business. You gotta start out with the basics from the very beginning, well before it's time for you to launch your new business or idea. You have to do the research, you have to get the right people on board. Start out with your own draft picks. Pick the people that you know are going to help you be successful. You got to get your financials in order. That, to me, that's the number one thing. You have to have that financial stability that you need. So Navia talked about it before, about having that relationship with your bankers or having a relationship with your micro lenders. You got to get your team set up to win. So as you prepare and you're getting your team set up to win when it's time for the Super Bowl and to kick off your new product or whatever it is you're doing, you're going to be ready because you've taken the time to prepare. So that's what being in it to win it means. Whether you're using plan A, B, or C, use all your tools in your toolbox to be ready to win that Super Bowl game, which is at the end of the day, making sure your business is successful.
I hope the Lions follow this approach so we can get a Super Bowl victory.
Let's hope so. We got our fingers crossed. They got some good draft picks.
We got our fingers crossed. Ray Waters, let me go over to you. Same question. Are you in it to win it? What does it mean to you? And what should that mean for small businesses as well?
Thanks, Mark. Hello, Regina and Tawnya. I'll put you both on my draft pick for help for small companies. We are at the Detroit Development Fund, and as you mentioned, Mark, we provide growth capital to businesses in Detroit who aren't able to get traditional bank financing yet. It's not because banks don't want to do it. They do much of it, but they're highly regulated. And so banks like Fifth Third provide us with different types of capital to allow us to reach deeper into the market. But what it really means to us here and what we're seeing is exactly what Tawnya and Regina said. It's being ready for what's going forward. Starting a business is not easy. Owning a business and running it is stressful, more than stressful. It's a full-time job, but in this last year and a half, it's been incredibly stressful. But what I think we're starting to see in Detroit through Build Institute and others is the ability to provide resources to these companies. And I think the small businesses so often don't know where those resources are. Where do I find this and where do I find that? And that's where we collaborate with Bill, with Tawnya, and there's lots of now sites out there where companies can go. Detroit Means Business. The MEDC has a resource site. The minority business groups have sites. It's important for small businesses to know where to find resources to help them with their business plan, to help them with their technology, to help them with the things we've all talked about today. And that's what I think it means here in Detroit, is having those resources and being able to direct these businesses that need it to the right spot. And then it's been said before, but it's so critical. And we work with a lot of small companies, do loans from 5 to 200,000. It's so critical to work with the company or the organization. In our case, we're a nonprofit that's helping you. And because if you work with them and partner with them, I think it's really can be a real plus for your future. The one thing that I caution small businesses on, and we have a lot, we see more and more of it, don't get desperate and don't go online to one of these online groups that'll approve your loan within 24 hours. I've seen a lot of companies do that, but what you don't understand when you do that sometimes is the interest rates can be as high as 30, 40%. So there are other ways to do it, may not be within 24 hours, but that's how I think we're all in it to win it. And that's why we've been collaborating so well together with organizations here in the city.
So make sure that you do your due diligence for sure. Absolutely. Tawnya, I want to come back to you. I'm going to continue with the questions. There's a question I want to address. Someone dropped it in the chat. It says, I have a business account at Fifth Third. Again, they heard my comment about empty storefronts. I have a business account at Fifth Third. I have an IT training business that trains youth in Detroit. I'm having difficulty procuring a grant or a loan for my business. It would be great for my business to be housed in one of those empty storefronts. Any help or suggestions to this particular individual? Robert S.
Yes, absolutely. I don't have any problem dropping my contact information in the chat for everyone to have, and you guys can reach out me directly, and we can have a one-off conversation on how we can help you. That's why it's so important to have a great relationship with your banker, because we have many resources that people don't think we necessarily have. And if for some reason we can't help you directly, or we don't have the current risk appetite for that, we have community partners like Detroit Development Fund and Bill Institute, places that we can refer you so we can get you to a yes, and that we can direct you to the appropriate resources that can get you what you need, whether it's a new storefront for yourself or the capital to help you do the build out for that new storefront. So
Yeah.
I will definitely make sure my information is in the chat, because there are a wealth of resources out there to help each and every one of you.
And that's the beauty of this workshop. You get access to business leaders like this firsthand. You have the contact information. There you go. Beautiful, direct access to people. Compared to a year ago, there are more tools. Last year, this time, we were optimistic. Let's fast forward to today. Now, vaccines have rolled out. There are certainly protocols out there as well, business protocols in place. The country continues to reopen, right? We're just staying here in Detroit as well. Businesses continue to reopen. However, are we on the road to recovery? I'm asking this question. We'll start out with you, Ray. Are we on the road to recovery? And with that said, if we are, then what should entrepreneurs be doing now? What should they be focused on as part of this road to recovery?
I do think that, Mark, that we are on a road. We are seeing it in our loan portfolio. We have some 120 small Detroit businesses in our portfolio, and we're starting to see them grow again. But I think the important thing we're seeing, and it's what we're doing internally here at DDF too, they have to find solutions to become more efficient in what they do because their costs are not going down. So resources to help them become more efficient in their operations. I think they really have to, what we've seen with many of our businesses, building that footprint out there on the internet, not just in the neighborhood, but on the internet, and building your footprint so that your name gets out there more and more. And again, there are resources here in Detroit to help small businesses do that at very little or no cost to help them do that. But I think those are the better efficiencies. And then again, as I said earlier, finding the resources that you can use. It's what you talked about earlier a little bit, Mark, is building a team around you. You can build it with people, or you can build it with organizations that are willing to work together and work with you to help you reach that goal. But I think the biggest challenge coming forward is what we're all seeing, and that's the inflation cost of what may happen when you're hiring people, and we can't control that. And these small businesses can't control that. This is one thing we've found over the years.
Yeah, and Regina,
go ahead.
Go ahead, Ray. Go ahead, Ray.
I'm just one of the things we've found. The small businesses that make it and grow are the ones that have the most passion and the most drive. And if you've got passion and drive, you'll figure it out. You'll hit this hurdle, but you won't fall back. You'll go under it, around it to get through it. So that's the critical piece. You've got to believe in yourself and the passion. And we're seeing that in a lot of our loan customers today.
Outstanding. And Regina Ann Campbell, you work with a lot of startups, people considering starting a business, women-owned, men-owned businesses. Again, as we're in this road to recovery, what should those individuals, hey, you know what, I had a great dream last night. I'm waking up, I got this passion that Ray is talking about. I'm looking to start my own business. What should I do? What should I focus on, particularly during these challenging times?
Well, just real quickly, so for ideators who have an idea, naturally we have classes that can support them. But what I always encourage the people to do is, one, go to online resources which are free. For example, there's the Canvanizer.com, where it's a business model canvas. Go through that, do some initial work up front, start to talk to 100 people, customer discovery, see who might be interested in your business idea. And then two, Wayne State University, the business school, has a business librarian who will do market research. So if you're in the idea stage, start doing things free and on your own, put some sweat into the game, and then come back and take advantage of Build Institute, DDF, and other of the organizations. Now let's talk about the micro businesses, which are 70% of this Detroit market. What they should do, because again, they're already in business, one, they need to take time to come out of the business and look at where they are around resources and operations. And organizations like Build, Fifth Third, who have technical assistance, and Ray's organization can help them take a look and do a scan of their business, where they are, to make strategic decisions about existing inventory or products and services. Does this make sense for now? So because of COVID, they really need to take the time to come out the business, look at the overall financials, and make some decisions about where they're going forward. So that's my recommendation one, because some people are continuing to do what they've always done, and they're wondering why revenue isn't increasing or why customers aren't coming in. They have to always be able to be strategic and look in the business. And our organizations are here to help the owners be able to come out and do that strategic thought leadership with partners around them to go forward. Next, if it is to do with capital, there are several entities out here that can support in capital. So not being afraid to come out and try to find the right capital and right match, even if the first one is a no. We have a very close relationship in this ecosystem around collaboration, and there are ways you can get to yes. You're gonna have to do some work, but you can get to yes. So those are my first initial things that I would say for the ideator and the micro businesses.
Yeah, and like you said, you can't just sit there. You still got to do homework. And the beauty of technology is makes homework a little bit easier with Google and other tools out there. And Tawnya, I want to come down to you. According to a recent U.S. Chamber of Commerce study, revenue, these are the key things that are really keeping entrepreneurs up at night. One, according to the study, this is the U.S. again, Chamber of Commerce, revenue. So certainly what they mean by that is a lot of entrepreneurs burn through a lot of revenue to stay open for the last 2 years. And by burning through that revenue over the last 2 years, some are in a precarious position looking ahead. We heard Tom talk about inflation. That's another concern. Obviously, the latest numbers came out this morning. I think it was at 8%. It was down ever so slightly, but it did come down a little bit. Another concern of COVID protocols and retaining talent, getting talent during these challenging times. Again, Tom did a wonderful job laying out the gap and shortfall. So these are the top issues as identified according to the study, which went through December of last year. So with that said, if you heard that study and you heard those challenges, Tawnya Rose, from Fifth Third's perspective, what advice would you give to these individuals with those major concerns?
The advice I have is that, number one, again, the relationship with the banker, finding out what resources are available to them. There are free money or low interest loans that are available to them. Come and talk to us. And even if we can't specifically give it to you, we can refer you to someone that meets your needs where you are, and we help you develop a strategy in the plan so that at some point, if you can't come to Fifth Third to get the money, that you will be able to in the future. But we're not going to just say no to you and kick you out the door. We're going to hand you off to someone that does meet your current need. And then when you start talking about getting the right players to be on your team, you got to be a little bit more, have a little ingenuity and be willing to train people. Once you get some loyal folks that want to work, you can train them to give you the outcomes that you're looking for. Give them additional education programs, give them incentives so that they feel loyal to you and your brand and what you're doing. That makes a huge difference in retaining talent.
Absolutely. And for those of you, Tamika just dropped the link that I was referencing the article. I would encourage you. It's a powerful article. Pull it up, use it, because it's also one of the foundational pieces that we've used to put together this workshop. Ray Waters, same thing. You talked about inflation. I was watching the local news the other day, by my good friend was reporting on it, Paula Tutman from Channel 4, and she was talking about a business that was grappling with this thing called inflation, exactly what the concern was. And there was a business in Hamtramck, for example, they make all these, I don't know, hamburger buns, hot dog buns, and breads, but they supply hotels and restaurants and whatever across Metro Detroit and across the country. And his business was like, I'm not sure what I do. with this inflation, do I eat the cost or do I pass it on to the customer? So what advice, again, it goes back to those concerns that businesses are grappling with is, what do I do in that situation? How do I make the best decision for my business in terms of what do I do during these challenging times?
Well, it is different for each business, Mark, and each industry that you're in. But what I think we're seeing many of our loan customers do is, as I said, try to increase their efficiency, but they're starting to eat some of that inflation rather than move it on to their customers and risk losing customers. They're starting to see their profit margin, gross profit margin drop a bit, which is why in the short term, they may need some access to capital in smaller loans. I think a lot depends on who your customers are and your competition. But if you're dealing with a major company and you keep increasing their price, they may be out looking for others. So I think I would say that probably 60% of our small businesses are eating some of the inflation themselves by dropping some of their gross margin. It's not a great thing to do, and you don't want to do it. But once we get through this, I think it'll even itself out. We're seeing raising prices, particularly those that are in the retail and consumer industry are moving up the ladder. But that's pretty true with everybody. But that's kind of, I think, what we're seeing within our portfolio right now.
Regina Ann Campbell, is people coming into Build Institute, and again, we got those statistics about the inflation and revenue burning through money. Are they ready to open up a business right now? I mean, in today's environment, what are the biggest challenges for them?
Well, the biggest challenges, one is the capital piece and labor, which we already know. But I think also we like to encourage people to take time to think about what's the best way to launch a business. The first thing most entrepreneurs who come to Build say, I want a space, right? And so a space may not always be what is necessary to do business. There are several examples out here where people can go and get a contract to work with a company to provide the service that they want to deliver. You can also lease a space inside of a commercial building. You don't have to have an actual space to deliver services and products. So people being able to think differently about how to be in business, especially with the market and customer behavior changing, I think that's very important and critical. And so we advise people to think about, do you need a brick and mortar? Can you do e-commerce? And e-commerce is a necessity. And as you know, we're doing that GoDaddy program to help 150 entrepreneurs with websites. So I think our businesses need to rethink these ideas, like, how do I start business? How do I do this service? Do I have to have my own facility, my own place? What other ways can I generate revenue? So that's the one thing that's extremely important. And then additionally, for the existing micro businesses, sometimes they're selling products, but it may not make sense to sell all of them. And so with inflation, it's like, what is selling the most? Really taking the time to pay attention to what's selling most. Can they, as we already said, increase the cost on that particular product and make revenue? So making some strategic decisions, because inflation is here. I know that some businesses nowadays, you can go for a steak and they want $60 or $80. So, they have to be strategic about what they're selling and what customers are willing to pay for.
And as we begin to wrap up, Tawnya, I want to come down to you because you posted something in the chat, which is very germane to where we're going here. And by the way, before I forget, what Tawnya Rose is saying, if you have product, well, this is a great opportunity to go back and reassess your business operations. It's a great opportunity to go back and reassess your business lines as well. Are you selling too many products? Look, 20% of customers account for 80% of revenue. Just like from a product standpoint, historically, it's called the 80-20 rule, that 20 to 30% of your products will account for the majority of the revenue. So it's a great time to go back and reassess your product lines and pare back if you are in that product specific industry. And maybe it's time to peel the layer back for those unprofitable products, maybe, harvest them or even drop them and reinvest the resources. But Tawnya, I want to come down to you. You talked about in your chat room there, grants and programs and financing. I want to expound on the pitch competitions, what you're referencing there.
So there are several pitch competitions that are still out there in the Metro Detroit area. I know we are working on a new one that's coming up with Michigan Women Forward. We're calling it 53 Ideas. And even with this particular pitch competition, you don't have to be in business yet. You can just have a business idea and you can enter these types of pitch competitions where you can win up to $10,000 by participating in it. So not only is it 53 ideas, but there are other all year long. There are additional pitch competitions that will be coming out your way. Stay in touch with me, stay in touch with Ray, stay in touch with Regina. Everyone has different programs that are coming on every single month. You need to remember the types of things that came out during COVID, and don't let go of those particular grant opportunities because they're still out there and they're untapped. Get involved in them.
Yeah. You know, and we know that access to capital is always going to rise to the top when it comes to small businesses. And as I referenced earlier, a lot of people plowed through their revenues over the last 2 years. And so we got to figure out how to replenish those. What I'd like to do is to give you, all three of you, 30 seconds each to wrap up with any comments that you like to leave with our participants. Again, this is being recorded, so we'll have people watch this on Detroit Public Television, amongst other media platforms. So let's start with you, Ray, 30 seconds each in terms of what you would like to leave our participants for today.
Thank you. I put an email in the chat room, vholsey, HOLSEY at DetroitDevelopmentFund.com if you want to contact us. I want to say that it's the resources that have now started to work together in Detroit and collaborate that I think is a real strong effort to help small businesses. There are other lenders that we work with, Prosper Us Detroit, Invest Detroit, who also collaborate with us. So there's a whole wealth out there if you're willing to spend the time to find the resources on some of the sites I talked about. So keep going, one foot in front of the other, and keep that drive and passion, and we'll see it get there.
Let's come right over. We got Q&A. We'll get to Q&A in a moment as well. Regina Ann Campbell, same question, 30 seconds or so. What would you like to leave our participants with, please?
So the one thing I know, we all know that business owners are smarter now than ever. COVID has brought some unique skills and insights that a pandemic can only do. That being said, there are so many resources out here for and available for you. You've got to be willing to do the work and put in the time. Not everything will be a grant. You know, business, if you don't have a customer, you don't have a business. So keep in mind that in order to have a business and make revenue, you've got to put some skin in the game. And sometimes that means putting in your own resources and being able to be, able to get access to capital, working on credit. And there's organizations that help with that. So again, we're here for you. You just got to be willing to do the work and put some skin in the game.
And Tawnya Rose, we'll give you the final word in that 30 seconds or so, and then we'll have a couple of questions from the audience.
Well, I would like to offer a gift to all of the participants that are listening. Fifth Third has an 8-week training program that entrepreneurship training program that we work with Operation Hope on, and we fund it. And I would love to offer that to all of the participants for free. Well, the program isn't free, but it's free to you because Fifth Third is willing to cover the cost for it. Take advantage of it, and that will be the best 8 weeks that you've invested in your own business that you can imagine. So please take advantage of it, and I will make sure that we get that flyer to the lead group to pass out to the participants. And thank you so much for having us.
Well, you got a total of 12 outstanding weeks. You got the 4-week program with the Small Business Workshop, and then you have the 8-week program, of course, the free program with Fifth Third Bank as well. So Fifth Third remains engaged. Obviously, throughout the community. Sarah McCall asked a question. We read it here. How can small businesses remain competitive relative to larger organizations with significant resources, especially from the triple bottom line lens as the demand for it increases? So basically, how can small business remain competitive relative to the larger organizations when they have much more limited resources?
So I'll start by answering that. Hi, Sarah. So one, I think it's really easy. It's to know your customer, have a customer base that values what you're offering. provide consistent, competitive experience for the customer, and you can continue to bring in significant revenue. I think that's the best thing that a small business can do. And then actually, I know have the best team and be willing to grow and scale in different ways, whether you're having your product on shelves in larger commercial companies.
Anybody else?
I'm going to jump in again. I would say
Sure.
focus on what you do best. Mark mentioned it earlier, the whole 80-20 rule. You can't be everything to everybody. Focus on what your niche is and what you're the best at. And when you do that, you'll be successful in what your true market is.
Yeah. Before I come to you, Ray, real quick, the question, Regina Ann Campbell is the president of Build Institute. I think she has her contact information as well in the chat room. Ray Waters, give you the final word.
I think you can personalize it more as a small business. You can personalize it with your customers. You're a small business. Push that with them, that they're helping small business. They're helping create new jobs for Detroit residents. Large companies just sell things. They're not able to do that personalization. And if you can do that, we have a great example. One of our loan customers now moved up the ladder, the LIP bar, LIPBAR, that absolutely personalizes it. And they've just had great success. So that's what you have the option of doing, I think, as a small business.
Regina Ann Campbell and Tawnya Rose and Ray Waters, I want to thank you. Okay, well, I guess we got one more question. Tamika, would you mind jumping in with the question real quick and reading it?
Okay, the question is, with margins impacted by living wages due to the Great Resignation, how do businesses strike the right balance between passing the cost on to consumers and value for all interested, employees, customer, supplier, so that businesses stay afloat without downturn in revenue and remain competitive relative to larger organizations with significant resources?
And I'm going to give 1 minute, 1 minute response in total because we need to wrap up. So who would like to take on that question?
I'll just say it depends on each business. It'll mean something differently. There are resources out here. I know the state has that will cover certain costs towards an employee. So really taking a look at those opportunities that are out there to help pay for employees. And then also I know the state and the county are also working on other initiatives that can help provide labor for small business owners. I don't think there's like one solution. I think it's something that's being developed because again, talent is a tough thing to retain for small businesses because revenue is tough. So
yeah. Well, I wanted to cut off right here. If there are other questions coming in, I think Tawnya already offered. We're going to send out a flyer regarding some upcoming events that you can certainly access. They're free. And she got her contact information. She dropped it in the chat. So if you have any other questions for any of our panelists, please reach out to them directly. I do want to take this opportunity. I think these are great individuals. I've known them for a long time. Regina Ann Campbell is a jewel in this city. President of Build Institute. Tawnya Rose is wonderful. She's committed to the bank, committed to entrepreneurship in Detroit. She's a great individual as well. Connect with her directly. Ray Waters, the mayor of entrepreneurship with Detroit Development Fund. These are 3 leaders. We are very lucky to have these leaders in as part of this week's program. And I want to thank them very much. And as we segue, as we wrap up, let's give my closing comments. Next week, and we're dropping in the chat room an opportunity right now for you to register for next week's session, which is called Help Wanted. Yes, there it is. We heard about the labor shortage. Help Wanted. What do you do? What do you do during these challenging times? Help Wanted during the Great Resignation. You can't find people. You can't keep them. What do you do? We're going to spend a lot of time talking about that next week with Priscilla Archangel, and she's has Archangel and Associates, a human resource consulting firm here in Detroit. We'll also be talking about financial wellness credit, starting with credit, with Hilda Saad. That didn't sound right. Financial wellness starting with credit with Hilda Said, and she's with First Independence Bank. Registration is now open. You can also visit the website. All the contact information is here on the screen, and I believe it's also in the chat room. And we're going to ask you to certainly log in, register. It's free. Next week is only from 10 until 11 o'clock. And lastly, there's a survey that will be coming out later today, right after this event. There will be a 10-question survey through SurveyMonkey. Just take a couple minutes. That's how we build these programs, and give us feedback on how we did today. All right, I want to thank you all for joining us. Make it a great day. Make it a great week. And we'll check you out next Wednesday at 10 o'clock for the Small Business Workshop. And I will check you out Sunday in the conference room with Mark Esley on 910 AM the Superstation. Tune in, and we never disappoint. Have a great week, everyone. Enjoy the beautiful
Thanks,
weather.
Mark.
We'll talk to you all soon.
Thanks
Thank
for
you,
having us,
everybody.
Mark.
Have a
All
great
right,
week.
you're welcome.